I'm just hitting the magic record button now, so everyone's aware that this will be recorded and loaded up to the conference hub. And if I could just ask everyone, if you look in the chat at the moment, I've loaded up a link there. If everyone could click on that link, and at the beginning of the session, if you just fill in your personal details and do not close the window. Once you've filled in your personal details, just leave it open. And at the end of the session, we'll ask you to provide some feedback on the session. And then once you've done that, you may submit it. So just a little bit of housekeeping as well. Please keep your microphones off. You know, I think we're all pretty good with this Zoom thing after 2 years of doing it. Keep your microphones off unless you have a question. If you have a question, please raise your hand or put it in the chat. And we'll be keeping an eye on the chat throughout the session. So microphones off, session is being recorded, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Patience Moyo and Dr. Jessica Biles, who will be doing an interactive discussion on developing understanding of student expectations. Thank you, and I think we're throwing over to Patience.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you everyone for attending. I'll now start sharing the PowerPoint presentation, and I'll let Jess present the first few PowerPoint slides before I start presenting from my end.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Patience. And most importantly, before we start today, I would like to acknowledge the lands and waters of the Wiradjuri peoples whose country we live and work on. We'd like to acknowledge elders, both past and present, and extend our respect to Aboriginal colleagues who may be present in today's presentation. So I'd like to introduce myself. There are some people in attendance who I haven't yet met. My name is Jess Biles. I am a senior lecturer and work in the School of Nursing, Paramedicine and Healthcare Sciences. I would like to introduce my colleague, Patience. Patience is based at the Dubbo campus. I'm based at the Albury campus. And we would like to just acknowledge the third team member, Dr. Kylie Murphy, who also works at Charles Sturt University in the School of what was community health, now has a lovely new name that I can't remember. Kylie is a senior lecturer, and really sad that she can't be here today, but we would like to just acknowledge Kylie and how important she is to our boutique team. So for the format of today, we are actually going to provide a brief overview of the project. And Patience is going to lead that overview. So thank you very much, Patience. That will be followed by some questions that we're going to pose to the audience, and we really hope will stimulate some great discussion. So what did we aim to do? We aim to explore the Charles Sturt University undergraduate nursing students' expectations of their university learning and their corresponding experiences and satisfaction. I would like to just extend some thanks to Professor Hungerford, who is no longer works at Charles Sturt University, but Professor Hungerford was integral in supporting the preliminary phases of the project. So just like to acknowledge her contributions there. Importantly, I think it's really important that we note that this work, we have actually positioned students as consumers. So not everyone has that positioning, but the whole basis of this work was that universities are operating in a business model and students are a consumer within that framework. The work was the result of an extensive portfolio from 2017 to 2019, the students' portfolio, where we really aim to unpack the experiences of learners in the school. So throughout the presentation, we'll share our research, which is excellent, and we'll also pause for some discussion points. We really value the participation of the audience, and we might even take a few notes if that's okay with everyone, because we see this research as being something that we can expand on in the future. And last but not least, I will say that if you have some comments, questions, please pop them into the chat. take your mute button off. This really is an interactive discussion, but we are providing an overview of the project so we know what to talk about. Okay, do I hand over to you now, Patience?
Yes, thank you, Jess. Thank you, Jess. Hello, everyone. As noted, already noted, my name is Patience Moyo, based on Double Campus. I'm a lecturer in nursing. So I'll take over from where Jessica is left. As you have noted, that our aim was to explore the student expectations of their course learning within the university. And the first question that I would like to ask, this is just to challenge us so that we can start having a discussion in this regard, is in your practice, have you ever considered the students' prior expectations of their university learning? Have you ever considered the students' prior expectations of their university learning within your practice? This is a question for us to discuss. So please feel free to unmute your mic or to pop your responses within the chat box. Thank you.
I'll pipe in.
Thank you.
So I look after postgraduate business, which is only online. And I think it's not necessarily so much their expectations regarding the learning. I feel that their expectations will be that it's relatable to their workplace. So the majority of the students that I'm dealing with are working full time, and they're actually looking to progress their career from sort of early to mid-level to further up. So obviously they want something that's relatable, that's going to build their skills to progress along that journey. And so that's what the feedback is, I guess, generally around that. I guess what we don't necessarily ask is, or explore that further in terms of what are their expectations in terms of what's delivered, how it's delivered, what sort of materials they'll be engaging, whether it's textual, whether it's visual, you know. And that's such an interesting question, Patience and Jess, because yeah, I don't think we explore it enough.
Thank you, Kath. You've raised some valid points and even included the content and delivery, the materials used, and how exactly they are expected to they expect to engage in this regard. These are some valid points that you have raised that we were considering is as academics, as administrative staff. Have we considered those expectations, because they do certainly have an impact in terms of the satisfaction, in terms of the experiences that the students encounter, as we will note when we disseminate our findings in this regard. So I'm just going through the chat. Okay, that's okay. Thank you, Peter. Peter has noted that he has actually considered those, but never really actually asked them, and perhaps this is something that could be considered in future. And Debbie has considered that it's a big consideration for the academic skills team. And I like the idea that you've acknowledged that misalignment of the expectations can be fatal to the student's academic career. And this is what we discovered as we were undertaking this research. So thank you, Debbie. And thank you, Lloyd, that yes, you do, but change is up to the students, and have often been expecting the chalk and talk. This is an interesting point. Thank you for sharing your point, Lloyd. So yes, what we are saying is this is something that we wanted to explore. Are there any expectations, or do we think there are expectations when there are no expectations in this case? And hence the reason why we have actually undertaken this research, so that we can explore this and actually develop an understanding of these expectations if they are actually present. So I'll go back to sharing the PowerPoint slide. So what we did is between March 2020 and May 2020, we conducted a mixed methods survey at an Australian regional university, to which 82 Bachelor of Nursing students completed the survey. And the survey actually contained both qualitative and quantitative questions, to which they were open as well as closed questions. And in these questions, the students, there were some predetermined ordinal options, and the students actually, sorry, I keep referring to them as students. In this case, the participants actually had opportunities to elaborate on some of the questions. And prior to us actually conducting the survey, we obtained an ethics approval, and the ethics protocol number is evident here on the PowerPoint slide, which is on display in this case. Notably, for data analysis, we used the inferential as well as the descriptive data analysis, the descriptive and inferential statistics with the Pearson R correlation. And we also used the qualitative thematic analysis as well as the Lincoln and the GABA qualitative framework. As you will note on this PowerPoint slide, this is an example of the in vivo coding which we did. And notably, while we started with certain categories in our initial research survey, we discovered more categories as we were undertaking the in vivo coding as well, which was quite interesting in this regard. Notably, we did a descriptive statistics as well as the Pearson R correlation. As you will note, in this case, the overall satisfaction with the course was relatively high, being 3.20 with a standard deviation of 1.16. Again, what we noted in this case was that while the overall course satisfaction was rated moderate to high, there was, however, some they tended to be substantially below expectation for clarity of teacher communication. As you will note here, the discrepancy was minus 0.58. Then we have the suitability of subject availability timing, which was minus 0.49. And then we have the helpfulness of the academic staff, which was minus 0.50. As well as the availability of technical resources, which was which rated at minus 0.44 in this case. However, when we look at the peer support, community building, so the support that the students receive from other students, it rated at minus 0.24, which showed that the experience rated above the expectation only for the supportiveness from the peers. For our key correlational findings, the first one, the students valued the flexibility in subject requirements, the helpfulness of academic staff, the clarity of teacher communications, and these areas led to high levels of satisfaction, which means that more of these things actually meant that there was more satisfaction among students. Thank you, Kev. Kev, if you've raised your hand.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Can I just ask, you asked the questions around the expectations and the reality at a single point in time.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Kev. Our key correlational findings too, the expectation experience discrepancies correlated strongly negatively with satisfaction in the following respective areas: the helpfulness of academic staff, the timetable suitability, the timing of the subject availability, as well as the support to navigate the university systems. And what this meant is that less discrepancy was associated with more satisfaction in these particular areas. And lastly, but not least, the strongest predictor of overall satisfaction level of entire university experience was the extent to which the students felt that they received support to navigate the systems. And what it means is less discrepancy in this area was associated with more satisfaction. So I think someone wanted to say something. I'll just pause for a minute. Okay, sorry, I'll continue. Now, before I provide a summary of what we learned, the question we ended up was how can we better meet or modify or manage the student expectations, especially given that the university is now operating at a time where the universities have fiscal responsibilities. A big challenge for us all in this case. So our summary of findings is that there is a very strong relationship between the expectations, experiences, and levels of satisfaction. And the students' satisfaction was heavily influenced by the extent to which they felt supported to navigate the university systems. And this particularly demonstrates the significance of the relationship that is required between the service delivery as well as customer service satisfaction. As you will note, we refer to the participants or students as the customers because the universities are operating using a business model in this day and age. We noted that learning satisfaction has moved beyond content delivery and is now reliant on all services within a university. Whereas previously, in the past, students were only concerned about the learning content and how the content is delivered. But now it's all reliant on all the services that are offered within the university. And in this case, given that the service delivery has moved beyond the content as well as the delivery, and this now impacts the customer satisfaction in the current neoliberal context of higher education provision, it is therefore important for academics and the administrative staff to work in partnerships with the students to ensure that positive experiences can be achieved for the learners. However, I would like to challenge each one of us today. How can the university or faculty address this mismatch between what students expect and what can be provided? How can the university or faculty address the mismatch between what students expect and what can be provided? Especially bearing in mind that we have a fiscal responsibility as a university. So how can we address this mismatch? What can we do moving on? This is a time for us to discuss.
Patience, I think Kylie might have her hand raised.
Okay, thank you, Kylie.
Love what you're saying so far. Very interesting. Look, one of the ways I address the mismatch is asking them in clear and honest communication. So I always establish my expectations and theirs in the first class. And where there's a mismatch, we work it out. And those conversations happen at least 4 times a session.
Okay.
Give or take. But yeah. Communication, I think, is the key, but that's at a lecturer level, not at a faculty and school level. But I think clear and honest communication is the key to always sorting out expectation gaps.
Thank you, Kylie. Just out of interest, has it been always possible, or how easy or how difficult has it been to meet the mismatch in terms of the expectations? Have you experienced any challenges in meeting those?
Oh, yeah. Honesty. When I have challenges, sometimes I just have to say to them, we can't. That it's just not physically possible for that to be achieved. But what I often try to do, so sometimes it is just an honest discussion of what you're expecting is just not realistic. It's, but often it's a matter of going, okay, how can we achieve that? And have that conversation with them. So you want this is where I'm at. How can we bridge that gap? And actually asking them, and sometimes it results in me learning from them, which is fantastic. Thank you, Ben, for the clap. Sometimes it results in them learning from me, also fantastic. And sometimes it results in a compromise that we're both happy with. So again, I just think honest and good communication, and it does take time, and it does take time out of learning time. Yes. But to me, if we get that expectation gap resolved up front and manage it through the process, the learning is significantly easier, and there's less challenges and less disruption during the session.
Thank you, Kylie. Oh, sorry, Jess.
No, I was about to say, I think that's a really good point, Kylie. And I think what really surprised us, though, when we were looking at the findings was that the expectations were honestly beyond really what the school could provide. And we sort of thought, oh, you know, they might be expecting vibrant academics, or, you know, they might be expecting the latest and greatest research or excellent simulation labs, but it actually had nothing to do with that. That was what was so interesting.
My most recent one, Jess, was a student goes, oh, well, we want to come on campus. It's like don't have on campus, you know, obviously no on-campus classes. So it was an online meeting, and it was a big tension for them. And the resolution was, there is nothing stopping you guys forming a study group. There's the library, there are spaces on campus. Come on campus. You don't need me to have an online class for you guys to catch up and actually have a study group and work through this together. That was the compromise we came to. But yeah, it was a tension. They were really upset about it. It took us, I don't know, 5 minutes out of class time, but that's where we got to. And they did. Some of them had an online study group because some were in Newcastle, Tamworth, etc. And others actually, I ran into them down here at the library. So that was the tension, that was the expectation, that was the solution. And they came up with the solution. Facilitated, but you know, they came up with it.
Thank you, Kylie. You've raised some valid points there. I like the idea that that you mentioned that in the end they could be learning from both academics and the students, and also the solution which is facilitated as well. That's great that there was a solution that came up there, even though facilitated. Thank you for sharing your experiences in this case. Sorry, Kath, you had your hand up. Sorry for the wait.
No worries. So I think that's a really valid point about the fact that they can come on campus, because I don't know whether you guys have been in the library during the lockdown, but it was quite full here on Bathurst campus. So I think the students were still wanting to be in their study space, the ones that were on campus. I just thought it was really interesting that you said that the strongest predictor of overall satisfaction was to the extent to which they felt they received support to navigate university systems. We were talking about that earlier in our session, Kylie and mine, and I think one of the things is the consistency around where, you know, people use and place things on the Interact site, because it'll vary from lecturer to lecturer, and that's not the lecturer's fault. It's what they think is logical is not always the same as somebody else thinks is logical. So that, from a university perspective, could be something that could be addressed around, you know, and DLT could kind of look at that as a project as well, around, you know, trying to get more consistency around how we do and where we do locate things on the Interact site. But the other thing I just wanted to talk about an experience I had recently. So we have a master's in social and organisational learning, and we had 5 applicants from one organisation in Singapore. It's a faith-based organisation, it's a moral charity, and they wanted, their employer was wanting to send them all to come and study with us. And you know, the biggest hurdle for them was accepting their offer. They could not accept their offer. And I go back to international admissions and say, how do they do that? Oh, they just have to enter their details just like they did on their application form. The problem was that what had happened was in the form, they put all their names on one line. And so they were then trying to put their family name in the family name section and their given names in the given name section. It wasn't working. And also the other thing was that their birth dates had been changed around. So instead of being the 6th of the 8th, 1984, it was the 8th of the 6th, 1984. And because, you know, they were born on the 6th and not the 26th, that wasn't evident. But you know what? There was, if I hadn't, and my job as a course director is to actually write curriculum and design courses, not to help a student navigate a system. But if I hadn't been persistent and Zoomed with these students who are in Singapore because they were being told to get in touch with Student Central, we wouldn't have solved that problem and come across what it is. And we would have lost 5 students, international students at a time, you know, when we've just ceased a partnership that was fairly enormous for us. That the organisation was paying for it. And that's a university system that I wonder how many other students are having trouble navigating. And when I got IT involved, and they said, look, there's all sorts of things that are done at the admission process. Like, for example, an underscore might be put in to connect students' names, or a hyphen. Is it got spaces or not spaces? And, you know, a computer just, it wants you to be precise. But humans will put variability in there. So that's a major barrier as well.
Thank you, Kath. You've highlighted some very, very important aspects in terms of the systems, notably the Interact 2 sites, which are varied across subjects, which can be challenging because students would expect all subjects to have a similar presentation for the Interact 2 sites. I do concur with that. And even just some minor changes that you have noted in terms of the application form and the form where they have to be accepting the enrollments. That's very interesting, and I hope Jesse has noted this down, because we certainly need to be looking into this so that this can be changed in future. Thank you, Kate, for sharing this. I'm noticing the chat. There's some interesting points there that I've noted, but perhaps before I go to the chats, Lloyd has had his hand up for a while. I will give this chance to Lloyd, and then Ben, I think you also had your hand up as well. After Lloyd, it will be Ben. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I just put in the comment, Be the Frog. So Be the Frog's a little book written by Dan Ratner for his daughter. He's a marketing advertiser, and she basically wanted to know what he did.
Yeah.
And it's all around that brand and saying, you know, when we create the expectations of come to uni, when we look at what we're actually promoting out there and our images that we're using, what is it we're actually promoting? When you think about it, we are promoting the social life, the interaction with peers, the great looking spaces. So when people are choosing to come here over other universities, it's not just about the course or the content, it's about those other things that actually feel like space and, you know, the perceived benefits of coming here.
Yes.
And that's one of our challenges, is say, are we actually being the frog? Are we actually living up to that brand? And like you're saying, how do we actually achieve that? Because it's one thing to promote that and, you know, send that expectation to students that when you come here, this is what it's going to look like. This is where what's going to happen every day. It's all going to be socialite and people everywhere and parties, and the reality is not always that.
I think that's a really great point, Lloyd, and we haven't really touched on the qualitative findings in this presentation, but that's something that certainly students spoke about in that particular area, where they felt quite disheartened that they had thought that it was going to be a flexible approach to learning. They thought that meant that they could go from online to on campus, that they could pick from a range of tutorials, but that wasn't the case. And predominantly the students spoke about, you know, uni actually didn't fit my childcare at all. I had no choice in the tutorial, but you said that I did. So there was this level of disappointment. which really the qualitative findings provide further context to some of the quantitative findings, but obviously beyond the time limit that we have today to present it all. So yeah, very interesting. Thank you, Lloyd. I wondered what the frog was.
Yes, thank you, Lloyd. Ben, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Patience. Yeah, no, I was actually just clapping Kylie before, but I will just tack onto the back of what Lloyd's just said there, and I guess from a Future Moves point of view, and we're here setting up expectations for students on a daily basis. That's our job, and I ask all academics, all staff at the university to give feedback back to us and how we can set these students' expectations correctly. And we feel that we're doing a good job, but it is a changing, morphing world that we live in. As we said, we're going to more that corporate model from the normal university model. So we want to set clear expectations, and I guess it also goes to the marketing team. And a big differentiation is Future Moves isn't marketing CSU, we are marketing higher education. And then we kind of drop out at year 10. And that's where I think there's maybe a bit of a gap, because then marketing comes at year 11 and 12. So please give us feedback, and I'll take it to Matt Hoff and the student recruitment team too, of how we can set these students' expectations correctly. We don't want to set them up to fail, that's for sure. And this is why we have our on-campus events where we put them in front of you, the lecturers, so they see what a real lecturer looks like and talks and things like that. So it's not American TV, this is reality sort of thing. So please give Future Moves and the student recruitment team as much feedback as you want, and we'll try and implement that in setting up expectations.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, Ben.
Probably leads nicely into our next question, Patience.
Yep. So our next question is, how do we meet the expectations of students when what they want is beyond the faculty members' control? I think earlier, Kate did touch that Kylie, I think, Kate or Kylie, one of the two, did touch that sometimes what the students expect is something that is beyond our control. So what do we do if it's beyond our control? Bearing in mind that the students are expecting us to provide support to navigate the systems, ensure that subject availability meets their expectations, the timetable availability as well meets their expectations. However, when you look at these things, this is something that is beyond faculty member expectations. So what do we do when we are faced with such similar situations in our quest to actually improve students' experiences as well as satisfaction? Thank you, Nalia.
Look, I think one of the things is honesty. I think we have to be honest with our students in that communication, and really sort of say, we actually, this is beyond, my reach. However, if you want to see change, or if we need change, then there is a few, formal ways for this to occur. Either going and emailing your course director, or the head of school, and starting small, and or giving that feedback in the official end of session, and give examples how their feedback has actually changed, maybe timetabling or scheduling in the past, anything like that. But I think the forefront of all of this is honesty, because they think that we can change everything for them. And that's, that's normal. That's human behavior. They're paying essentially for a service, which I hate when we see it that way, but it's true. And they want to know, how are we going to mold ourselves or what we do around them and their needs? And, that honesty and those conversations, like you mentioned before, Kylie, really, really, I think, are the forefront, and having it at the very beginning, and continuing those conversations. Because one thing that I say to my students is, I don't know that, that my sound isn't great in lectures unless you tell me, and I can't fix it and I can't change that if all you give me is that feedback right at the end of the session. You have to let me know when this is happening. Otherwise, there's no fix, and it doesn't benefit anybody. You know, so just being open and saying to them, it's not about being negative or saying that I'm not doing something right, but actually saying, or that, you know, that you're not being supported. It's actually saying, I need help, or I don't know where to find this, and then supporting them enough to maybe move them on to somebody else that may be able to create that change.
And I think, Noelia, also combining respect with that too. I've seen people ask students for feedback or create those conversations, but it's a sounding board, and actually listening is, I think, 3/4 of the trick anyhow.
Yeah.
But I do always try to then turn that into something that's actionable by them, by me, by somebody. And as you said, preferably at the time, not at the end of session. And you know what? I encourage them to elevate to head of school or course directors as required, but I also try to resolve it in class that's not required. So it's that balancing act there as well.
Yeah, I think it's more around the things that we cannot change. So when we can't change, so for example, if it's about being available after hours for an hour or two, and I can change that. I can just take an hour off in the afternoon when I want to, but then be available for them for an hour, and that's okay. But for the bigger things, I think it's also showing them that you have that interest. So not just palming them off, and not just saying, oh, there is a division that looks after them here, go and sort it out, but maybe being invested in that response. Like, okay, how about I email them, we'll link you in with them, and then it's sort of saying, I hear you, I understand, let's tackle this together, but that person can now, take it from there, because I think sometimes they don't know where to find services either, or where to get that help from.
True. Thank you, Nelia. And Kylie, you've mentioned some very important things in terms of providing that listening ear. Like as a university, we're talking of being student-faced. So when we are students-faced, what we're saying is provided that listening ear, and then also assuring the students that you are willing to take a step beyond what you can do to help them to find the support where they can be able to solicit it, rather than palming them off, because yes, definitely when they're palmed off, it creates even more problems in this case. So what we're saying is essentially there are many other things that we may not be able to provide support for, and therefore we should be able to link the students with the appropriate services or appropriate personnel to support them in such situations. Lloyd, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I find it interesting. Like, we talk about a lot of these services, and I think what happens, and I guess I've had multiple roles in the uni in my time since I've been here. So as the manager of First Nations Connect now, as well as a learning advisor and things like this. So got to see that multiple sides of students coming in. And one of the interesting things is, when we're talking about we're going to provide all these services to students or contact, one of the expectations is that all academic staff know where to find them, who they are as well, and how to navigate. Our own website is a challenge sometimes for staff. And like, I've been doing a lot of work this year in the Bachelor of Health Science Mental Health course. So they have a course site and 17 subject sites a year, and not one of those sites actually mentions the First Nations Connect and the Indigenous Student Services. So even that basic information, you think in an Indigenous specific program, there would be that information provided to students, and it's not connected there. And so that's one of the things we're looking at, is saying, and so because I sit in Division of Learning and Teaching at the moment, so we've standardised some of those templates across subjects. And now that's our next step, is saying, yes, we're starting to get the layout, the template, the academic side, how to actually provide access to students to be able to click on something and directly go to set up a counselling appointment without having to try and navigate another website somewhere else.
Yeah, and that certainly resonated with this research. It was those big picture navigations that they were finding really challenging, not necessarily the in-house ones. Yeah.
Thank you, Lloyd. Just in the interest of time, I'll move on to the next question. So our next question is, how can we meet student expectations while acknowledging fiscal realities? How can we navigate, how can we meet students' expectations while acknowledging fiscal realities?
And so this question, I guess, really ties in all of that other discussion. If we're to have meaningful partnerships with all areas of the university, then that's about time. If we're to have partnerships with communities, that's about time. We're all living in a pandemic. We are working in a pandemic. So we understand the reality of the budget, the bottom line, which essentially is the driver of business and business decisions in the era that we are working in higher education. So just to provide some context around that question.
My most expensive commodity at the moment is time. I know we think of fiscal reality and money, but look, Kath's and my session earlier was about homeschooling, working from home, and what we can learn from that and apply to our own delivery. The flip side of that is, so an 8-hour workday becomes a 12-hour workday. Home becomes work, work becomes home. The barriers become blurred. So in terms of that fiscal reality, I will be honest, that has changed for me over the last 18 months to now be my most precious commodity is time, and trying to have these conversations with students, all these I'm going to say interactions, in the most efficient, effective manner for them to get results. But I'm not having individual discussions with 20 students is the best, is how I manage that differently defined term of fiscal reality. And hence why I do incorporate into the first classes, and usually in week 4, 7, and 11. And I do it as a conscious thing because it doesn't take a lot of time. It's done. We're all on the same page. And it actually says, so just so everyone knows, it saves me time. In the long run, it saves me a lot of time.
Yeah.
So I know that probably didn't answer your question, Patience and Jess, but my fiscal reality is time, most precious commodity, and that's how I manage it, by trying to be efficient and effective.
It's
brilliant. That idea would have to be that the same commodity is from the student's point of view. It's their time. And I've taught a study link subject for quite significant number of years, and the thing that always intrigues me, particularly because I saw a transition from students going to faculty and whoever controlled student study link, and the transition where they would ask very, very important questions that teaching staff had the answer for. Now they go to Student Central for a lot of that. And the issue there I see from students' perspective is that they want to, they need an answer when a heap of other students need the same answer. And it seems as though Student Central is under-resourced, and they get come back to me and ask all sorts of questions, usually because I've gone to Student Central where you've pointed me to go and they haven't answered. Can you answer me? To the extent that, you know, you have to say about the second time, no, I'm not. I got an interesting email one day from a student, and I just had to kindly point out, no, I can answer, because I don't even know the answer. I don't even know the answer anymore. Things have changed too much. And he said, oh, sorry, Stuart, I thought you did everything at the uni. So, you know, that's the kind of expectation that students have. I was almost tempted to email forward the email to the Vice Chancellor, but I thought, no, maybe he does, maybe he has the same sort of things that everybody thinks he has the answers. But there is an expectation there that we can't meet because of fiscal restraints at a whole organisational level, and it kicks back on students who get very, very frustrated.
I agree, Kylie and Stuart, you've mentioned some very important aspects in terms of the time And then in terms of the division of who should be addressing what and who shouldn't in this case, so there's that pulling and pushing. You go to the student central and student central say go to your academic, and this can be frustrating. It's one of the things that the students actually identified is one of the qualitative things in terms of being pushed back and forth, and they found that very frustrating. While it's, yes, fiscally as a university, there's been a reduction in terms of staff and the expectations that are there for each individual, and that can be a challenging, but that perhaps is something that needs to be addressed at a higher level, at a university level, rather than at a faculty level, because definitely it is one of the challenges that the students have noted that they have been experiencing in this case. So I'll move on to our one last question, and then we'll summarize. And so the last question is, how could we make possible pathways that enable expectations to align with the student's experience? How could we make possible pathways that enable expectations to align with the student's experience?
I think Ben's touched on this. Up until year 10, there's the role of future moves. Is that the name of the department? Yeah. But there is that gap. And if we look at courses like nursing, there's a strong vocational transition. So our typical student isn't a school leaver. It's somebody who's probably nearing 30, has a couple of kids, mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. So we could, and it is a wicked problem. I'll pop that there too.
Thank you, Jess.
Just on that point, I think that's where, these services like we've got Study Link, we've got the pathways courses and things like that, they can help. But it's how do we get those out, especially to the mature age students, is the tricky one. Whilst Future Moves and student recruitment work hard in schools, that's not the majority of our students at CSU, unfortunately. So how do we get that messaging out there and get those transition points in place for students is the trick as well.
A trick I've found is the difference between the people often running those programs are marketing the uni, promoting the uni, and we're delivering content. And it actually is different. I work closely with the Future Moves guys up here in Port and whatnot, but it's different.
100%.
Yes, I agree, Kylie.
But
yes.
Yeah, it's how we set those expectations up so that they walk in with open eyes, knowing what to expect. And that's one of the big things we say in regards to, I think Deb's made a point there too of, you got to put the hard yards in as a student. It's not just the hard yards from the academics. The hard yards has to come from you. It's not just come in, turn up to class and you're going to pass. You've got to put the hard yards in and access all the services. I guess this comes back to the point of how do we navigate the systems and how do we point people in the right direction, because we do have the services there to support students, but how do they find them? How do we find them? How do we lead them in the right direction? Is the web.
Yes, thank you, Ben. Peter, you've got your hand up. Thank you.
Sorry, I'll come on screen. And you can see I teach horticulture from my background. So I don't know how relevant this is, but a few months ago, I asked someone, I can't remember where it was, what do the students see? What does the student portal look like? And I was shown the student portal, and I nearly fell off my chair when I saw what was available there. And I've had a chat with a number of my colleagues, and I can guarantee you that 95% of my colleagues have absolutely no idea what is on the student portal and how they, as lecturers, can help guide students to help support, et cetera, by just knowing what is on the student portal. And so I don't know who to speak to or who's in charge of all of this, but really there should be some kind of professional development, if we can call it that, to teach us lecturers,
Mhm.
what is there and how to use it and how to guide the students to utilize that is all there. Because in actual fact, there is an enormous amount of support and help for students. And so, look, it's more a question than a statement. Is what do we do and how do we do that?
Mhm. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Kirsty. Kirsty has posted that this can be addressed through the students' communications and web office, which is run, they run the student portal. Okay, thank you, Kirsty. This is a learning cave for me as well. I wasn't aware that they do that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We'll take note of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Patience. I'll just add, sorry, my light camera's not coming on properly. Yeah, that we can help with that too. Deb's going to kill me, sorry, Deb, but I'm sure we can help with that PD, and we often work alongside Denise Wood and Deborah Shield in DLT to deliver that sort of PD, so we can definitely help with that. I will hunt down another URL for you all as well. Sorry, Deb's also sick of me spruiking this one, but in relation to the academic progress procedure that started session 1 this year, we did put a tool together to help students to develop their academic progress plan. I'm going to find the link for you and pop it in the chat. But what that actual tool does, it's an incredible resource for any staff member here to know exactly what support and resources are available for the types of challenges our students have. So the tool itself starts with statements of these are the barriers that affected my study this session, and then it gives them a range of strategies to overcome each of those barriers. And then listed under each of those strategies are all of the links to find Debbie's team, to book an appointment with her, all of her online resources, and every other support area across the university. It's a little bit of a hidden gem at the moment, but I'll find that link and I'll pop it in the chat for everyone. And it is, Peter, you'll be pleased to know, in the student portal.
Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you for that. Sorry, last but not least, we just wanted to share that our article has been accepted at an international journal publisher, the Teaching and Learning in Nursing, which is a great achievement for us in the university at large as well. Now would appreciate your feedback, please. Thank you.
Patience, well done on the talk. I just want to comment back on what Peter mentioned before. And Peter and I, we've spoken for a few years about first year and, you know, support and students really understanding what support is available from day one. Yeah, so the support is really, really important. And we did a big piece back when the the retention team, I think Peter at that stage. One thing that I really took from my first year teaching, and I followed those students quite closely because I teach in second and third year, and I actually look after the third year placements. So I make sure that they, you know, reflect on all aspects, not just their final placement, but they're learning across the board. And one thing that we did notice was, and you're quite right, Lloyd, it's not just an induction for staff overload, but for students as well. So it's about knowing exactly what services are important for them at that stage of their learning, and what they, you know, what you want to sort of. So I've found, because I do have access to the student portal, that there is so much on there and so many services and so many links and clicks to get to something that you don't know is actually there. Yeah. So I think it comes from, and back to what Ben said before, that, you know, we have to actually highlight the specific, you know, services that we feel might be beneficial. Now, an offset of that is saying, hey, it may not be exactly what you're looking for, but if you're struggling in some space, or you know, keeping those communications and being really honest with them straight up. One thing that I find Yes, it's all great for us to have links and everything, but I think having a presence from those services from the very beginning in the courses as well, putting faces to those services is key. So one thing that I introduced is I always invited the academic skills at different parts of the session to come in and say, hey, you've got an assignment coming up, we can offer X, Y, and Z. Hey, we know that, it's Are You Okay week. We have counsellors here available. Here are their contact details. It's about us being proactive as well and not waiting for the services to come to us and say, hey, here's what we can do. Yeah. As staff, I think it's really important that we make those connections with those services. And yes, we've had changes, and yes, there's, constant, but I feel that sometimes we go, oh, they will come to us if they see that we need it.
Thank you, Nelia. You've highlighted a very important note that we need to be proactive rather than reactive, because reactive doesn't always work. Showcasing those services that are available rather than waiting for them to come to the staff. I think it's a great idea that you've raised there. Just wanted to note that Ben has posted a link. Please, if you could leave your feedback for the session, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you. We still have I'll give 2 more minutes for us to continue discussing. If we have any further comments or point to note, please feel free to post it on the chat or to open your mic and share your opinions or ideas, please. Thank you, Jess, for noting down all those points.
I guess I would throw in, like, it's part of what I do in DLT as an educational designer, working with academic staff. I always, when we're working on their IT sites, try to get them to consider those support options, how they're actually providing those connections and information, and do they actually know that themselves? So I think part of sometimes what we need to feed back through, even through our leaders and through our leadership teams is, right, how are we actually getting this through our academic staff? So I know the School of Nursing have been running some staff workshops lately, but a lot of them have been around the academic side of it. This is about marking rubrics. This is about the systems, not necessarily about what are the supports that are available out there to support our students. So maybe providing back through our schools and that in those systems, those types of suggestions as well, so people actually get to track some of that.
Thank you, Lloyd. I like the aspect that the staff needs to be also included as well, because yes, if we don't know what the students are seeing, we will not be able to support them. And when they say they are feeling unsupported, we continue thinking that, but there's lots of support in the systems, and yet our systems may not be as supportive as you think they are. So thank you for that point. Peter, you have your hand up. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think given our time, I will now hand over to Ben. We've come to the end of our presentation. Sorry, I think we could have had more time, but however, we have only got 1 minute, and so I'll hand over to Ben. Thank you everyone for listening and for the contributions that you have brought forth, which are very helpful, and we've taken note of that, and we'll certainly be looking to finding out how we can actually utilize the points you've raised in order to improve the students' experiences in future. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Patience, and thanks, Jessica, and thanks to Kylie for the research as well, being part of the research. I think it's very valuable, and as Patience said, I think we could go all day on this subject and probably all month on this subject, because it's the world we're leading into. Just as a reminder again, that feedback form that you started to fill in at the beginning of the session, please go back and finish that off, and if you didn't fill it in at the beginning of the session, you can go back and do that now. I've put the link in. The easiest way to find that link is to go right to the top of the chat, where I put it at the beginning of the session as well, if you didn't already open it. A massive thank you to everyone. Just a reminder, this session has been recorded and will be uploaded to the Hub. So if you want to go back and refresh your memory or flick it on to a colleague that may not have been available to come to it today, please share that with them. And massive thanks to everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.